America is erupting. The public turns against Trump and demands weapons for Ukraine, louder and more fiercely than ever before. As drones tear through Russia's rare and frontline cities teeter and collapse, pressure mounts across Europe and the United States. Power games, hidden blows, and a sudden strategic turn no one expected. The world is choosing sides, and the next move could change everything. Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. It has exploded across the global information space. More than 60% of Americans support the supply of US weapons to Ukraine in its fight against the Russian Federation and wants Ukrainians to win the war against the aggressor state. This is stated in the results of a poll conducted by the Ronald Reagan Foundation. The data for this year also point to growing support for NATO, 68%, as well as broad bipartisan agreement that the United States should remain the world's strongest military power, 64%. In addition, 62% of respondents believe that Ukraine should win, and 64% support providing Ukraine with US weapons, which is 9 points more than last year, with bipartisan backing, 59% of Republicans and 75% of Democrats. There are also several other notable takeaways.
87% of Americans believe the United States should have the most powerful military in the world, including 97% of Republicans and 79% of Democrats. 60% of Americans think the U.S. should defend Taiwan militarily in the event of an attack by China, up from 48% a year ago. And 44% of Americans believe their military should be ready to fight two wars at the same time, against China and Russia, including 52% of Republicans and 38% of Democrats.
In Syzran, in Russia's Samara region, the local oil refinery has suspended operations following a successful Ukrainian strike on the facility. Drones hit the CDU-6 crude oil distillation unit, which is the plant's core piece of equipment. Repair work could take about a month. And that's not all. Drones destroyed 2,000 cubic meter fuel storage tanks in Russia's Ural region. As a result of the strike, at least 2 fuel tanks were confirmed destroyed. Meanwhile, drones attacked Engels, where an oil depot may have caught fire. The city is home to the Crystal plant, a petroleum product storage facility. The Crystal plant supplied fuel to the Engels 2 military air base. The oil depot is located just a few kilometers from the airfield. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces eliminated Russian troops who were attempting to infiltrate the rear. Operators of the 8th Regiment of Ukraine's Special Operations Forces during a special mission in forested terrain in the Donetsk region successfully neutralized 5 Russian servicemen. Taking advantage of the weather conditions, the enemy attempted to infiltrate the rear of Ukrainian positions, but a Ukrainian Special Operations Forces group thwarted the attempt. Meanwhile, in Donetsk, Special Operations Forces drones struck a UAV storage facility of the 9th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade of the 51st Army. The depot housed a significant number of tactical-level reconnaissance and strike drones as well as their warheads. In Luhansk region, in a settlement of Simeykine, a fuel and lubricants depot of the enemy's South Group was struck. As a result of the strike, storage tanks containing approximately 6,000 cubic meters of fuel were destroyed. The president of the Czech Republic has once again warned against halting aid to Ukraine. On Wednesday, Czech President Petr Pavel said that the Czech Republic must continue supporting Ukraine not only for ideological reasons, but also for practical ones.
By doing so, we would be closing the door to possible future cooperation in the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will come sooner or later.
In Pavel's view, Czech support for Ukraine is important, even if we set aside solidarity and the defense of principles and values and took at it purely from a pragmatic perspective.
Therefore, even those who are not inclined to believe that a country under attack should be helped should look at it this way. Security support for Ukraine also increases our own security in the future, and moreover can become a very significant economic opportunity.
Europe is fighting desperately for Ukraine. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron are advocating that the Kremlin's frozen assets be used exclusively in Ukraine's interests. Western partners are also constantly pressuring Trump over peace negotiations, defending the position of official Kyiv. Meanwhile, inside Russia itself, things are going extremely badly as sanctions are crippling the Russian economy.
Europe continues to fight for Ukraine. Today in Brussels, a decision is being made that just a year ago seemed impossible. The European Union has found a legal loophole that allows it to block Russian assets without the unanimous consent of all member states.
The published text is a complex legal document that tries to resolve two contradictions: to provide money to Ukraine without direct costs to member states, and to make decisions without the unanimity that is currently required. The result is complicated, but it might work.
Essentially, EU countries are getting themselves out of a trap they set for themselves at the start of the full-scale war. All these years, the fate of the frozen Russian assets depended on the moods of one or two countries ready to block any decision. Now, however, Brussels is using a mechanism designed for cases of economic shocks, and Russia's war against Ukraine has been officially recognized as just such a shock. Meanwhile, in European capitals, preparations are already underway for a move that could become the biggest financial blow to Russia during the entire rule of the bunker dweller. The European Commission has proposed allocating 210 billion euros in support to Ukraine by 2027. And a significant portion of these funds is supposed to come specifically from the frozen Russian assets. 185 billion are held in the Belgian depository Euroclear, and about 25 billion more are in accounts in other EU countries.
Germany will provide 25% of the support, which is the largest share among all countries.
This is especially important now as Belgium, the country where Euroclear is located, has in recent months been slowing down the process, fearing legal consequences and potential blows to its own financial system.
Belgium is more concerned than anyone else that Russia might later try to reclaim these assets through the courts, and in that case, Belgium would need the support of other countries. That's it. And that's why all the European countries that support the idea of Merz are also trying to convince Belgium. I think that in the end they will succeed.
And while the fate of Russian assets is being decided in Brussels, European leaders are fighting on another front, the diplomatic one. And the key figures here remain the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It is they, together with the Ukrainian government, who continue to defend Kyiv's interests before the United States.
We all support Ukraine, and we all support peace and peaceful negotiations to achieve a sustainable, lasting peace. And I believe that much now lies in our hands. Funding, the quality of equipment and training for the Ukrainian army, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, as well as the fact that the Russian economy is beginning to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and those of the US. And now, as it seems to me, the main issue is bringing our common positions closer together, Europeans, Ukrainians, and the US, in order to conclude these peace negotiations and once again strengthen trust under the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for Europeans, and for our collective security.
But let's return to the sanctions and their consequences for Russia. Analysts from The Insider have found that the sanctions are literally breaking the production chains of Russian weaponry. The country is unable to fully carry out complex chemical processing, access to the necessary reagents is closed off, and imports of strategic chemicals have plummeted. This has hit the production of rocket fuel especially hard, a critical sector without which modern weaponry is impossible.
For the first time, probably since the start of the full-scale war, there was a recorded decrease in weapons production in Russia in the month of September. Now, the problems that were talked about, say, 6 months ago, are perhaps already hitting Russia's military-industrial complex.
But the effect of the sanctions could be even stronger. For example, the main intelligence directorate is calling for restrictions on the entire production chain, since right now, 13 out of 49 Russian companies involved in the creation of missiles like the Iskander-M are still not under sanctions.
On the deep state map, Mirnograd is now completely surrounded by the so-called Gray Zone, indicating extremely unstable control and constant combat activity. At the same time, the situation in Pokrovsk remains critically difficult, with intense fighting, sustained pressure from enemy forces, and daily attempts to break through Ukrainian defenses. More in our report.
Look!
A nighttime drone raid in Cheboksary. According to reports from Russians, the local thermal power plant was damaged. Another piece of good news from Ukrainian defenders. On December 5th, SPU drones struck a liquefied gas terminal in the Russian port of Temryuk. As a result of the attack, more than 20 out of 30 storage tanks burned down. In addition, railroad tank cars were destroyed. Life isn't boring for the residents of Kursk region. People whose homes were destroyed and looted by Putin's army took to the streets in protest after payments compensating displaced persons for rental housing were cancelled. Fighters of Free Ichkeria, who are fighting on Ukraine's side, have challenged Ramzan Kadyrov to a meeting. Whether Kadyrov will come to meet his fellow citizens is unclear.
We urge you, pick a place, Don. Come on, Don. Give us a location, Don.
Meanwhile, as Ramzan searches for his path, the situation on the Russian-Ukrainian war front remains difficult.
The situation in the Pokrovsko-Mirnograd direction remains truly one of the most difficult on the front. Obviously, in terms of the intensity of combat operations, it is the most difficult. For our troops, this had not been reported for several days. Today we managed to straighten the front line, to withdraw from those gray zones that existed in the area, for example, of Suki Yar and Lysivka, because there were corresponding threats there. We managed to preserve our personnel and, as I already mentioned, withdraw them from these dangerous areas. And today we continue the defensive operation both in the Pokrovsk area and directly in Myrnorod.
The Ukrainian armed forces are holding back the enemy in the Kupiansk and Huliaipol directions.
All locations are important today, primarily because these are key settlements for our logistics. Including the Huliaipol direction, this gives the enemy the opportunity to focus on fire strikes and fire control over our logistics on the Zaporizhzhia front over at least several locations accordingly. That is why the enemy is currently making such attempts at active combat operations, trying to carry out full-scale offensive actions. However, here, the defense forces have so far managed to stop the enemy. It was entirely possible, let's say, to meticulously create a robust new line of defense, effectively making full use of the natural terrain as well, and the enemy's persistent attempts to infiltrate the actual settlement itself are being vigorously suppressed, as much as humanly possible today, with considerable success.
In the Lyman direction, the enemy has begun to use heavy armored vehicles. In the Alexandrovsk direction, 2 Ukrainian defenders from the 67th Brigade captured 6 occupiers. Another prisoner from the Dobropolsky direction was taken by our soldiers from the 82nd Brigade. In the video is Andriy Kudyakov, who signed a contract with the occupying army because of debts, something he now regrets.
I am deeply disappointed in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. What is stated in the contract does not match what is actually written.
Putin plans to replenish the ranks of the occupying army, or more precisely, to cover losses with new blood. That is why he signed the decree for another round of reservist call-ups, which will take place in Russia as early as 2026.
Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom and former commander-in-chief of the armed forces Valery Zaluzhnyi has returned to Ukraine and published a major article titled Politics and War, Reality versus Expectations, which he had conceived even before stepping down as commander-in-chief. In the piece, he outlines his vision for Ukraine's military strategy for the year ahead. What is behind Zaluzhny's unexpected visit, and what does this publication by the former top general really signal? We break it down in our report.
The former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine and now the ambassador to the United Kingdom, Valery Zaluzhny, has likely returned to Ukraine. He hinted at this on his Facebook page. The ex-commander posted a photo with his wife Olena, accompanied by the succinct caption, "There's no place like home." And soon after, on the website of Liga media outlet, an article authored by Zaluzhny appears about Ukraine's likely military strategy for the coming year. And now some people have started saying that this is a direct step toward a political career.
Many of Ukraine's partners, especially the United States, they keep saying that there is a sort of monopoly on power in Ukraine, that President Zelensky shouldn't remain in power indefinitely. And essentially, Ukraine is saying, well, we're considering different options.
In this article, Zaluzhny noted that by the end of 2023, the nature of the war had completely changed. Unlike Zaluzhny's previous writings, which focused exclusively on military matters, the new one also touches on politics. In Zaluzhny's opinion, for Ukraine to continue the war successfully, a military strategy alone is not enough. A clear political objective is needed, one that will allow us to see not only what the enemy is doing, but also how we ourselves should move forward. What outcome of the war will Ukraine consider a victory? Zaluzhny notes that, to this day, no one knows the answer.
Ukraine must be preserved. Our children, our women, our parents must live in peace, no matter what it costs us.
But Russia, on the other hand, has an absolutely clear goal. Its vision of victory is the elimination of Ukraine as an independent state. The former commander-in-chief also writes that relying solely on weapons supplies from partners is an unreliable plan.
And not even because sooner or later they will run out of such weapons, but primarily because the weapons themselves will eventually change and our partners will no longer have them.
Zaluzhny not only criticizes the Ukrainian government, but also proposes the same political goal for the country. In his opinion, victory for Ukraine should be the collapse of the Russian Empire, which poses an existential threat to Ukraine as an independent state. And he suggested that defeat should be considered the complete occupation of Ukraine as a result of its own collapse. After all, everything else is simply a continuation of the war.
Undoubtedly, when it comes to the military, that is forceful support, there is a sense that Valery Zaluzhny possesses it.
He insists that the only way to truly secure Ukraine is through joining NATO, deploying nuclear weapons, or stationing an allied military contingent. But Zaluzhny admits that these wishes are unrealistic, which means the war will continue in one form or another. This raises the question, is Zaluzhny planning a political career since this is being discussed more and more often? For example, this was commented on by diplomat and former Ukrainian ambassador to Belarus, Roman Bezmertny.
The first and most important thing I want to note is that extraordinary and plenipotentiary Ambassador Valery Zaluzhnyi has already gone beyond the scope of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff. In the current situation, I would insist that the new coalition should propose a government, and in fact, its approaches are sufficient for it to lead this government. His understanding of this genesis of development, this resource should not be wasted on having him sit in London and just continue writing articles.
Moreover, in regular public opinion polls about a potential presidency, Zaluzhnyi always holds leading positions.
Undoubtedly, Valery Fedorovich has a positive image, but still, he lacks experience in managing not the military sphere, but the civilian one, and this could create difficulties. But at this stage, I am not ready to claim that this model of power transition from President Zelensky to let's put it this way, let's not call him President Zaluzhnyi just yet, is being considered as the main scenario, though as one of the possible options, it is certainly more than possible.
But while Ukraine was discussing Zaluzhny's possible future, he had already returned to London and was there to greet President Zelensky at the airplane stairs.
Zelensky understands this as well, and naturally will try to, let's say, maintain good relations with Zaluzhnyi, possibly offering him proposals regarding integration into the power structure in which President Zelensky himself is the head.
Experts note that it all comes down to one thing. Even if Zaluzhnyi does have political ambitions, it's too early to talk about that for now. After all, at this point, it's all just speculation.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!